My name is Linda, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a nurse at Memorial Hospital here in Chicago. Last Thursday, I was driving to my parents' house for our annual Thanksgiving gathering, my heart racing with excitement because I finally had something incredible to share with my family. After 5 long years of sacrifice and saving every penny, I had reached my goal of $80,000 for a down payment on my first home. I couldn't wait to see their faces when I told them. Little did I know that this family dinner would become the most devastating day of my life, and everything I thought I knew about the people I loved would crumble in a matter of hours. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story that will make you question everything about family loyalty and trust, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, what happened next will shock you to your core. The journey to save $80,000 wasn't just about money. It was about proving to myself that I could build something meaningful from nothing. 5 years ago, when I graduated nursing school, I made a promise that I would own my own home before I turned 33. That promise became my North Star through every difficult decision I had to make. Working as a nurse meant I had opportunities for overtime that other people didn't have. While my friends were going out for drinks after work, I was picking up extra shifts. Weekend plans became weekend double shifts. I remember countless Friday nights when my coworkers would invite me to dinner or movies, and I'd have to decline because I had signed up for another 12-hour shift. The money was good, but the sacrifice was real. My living situation reflected my commitment to this goal. While other people my age were upgrading to nice apartments or buying new cars, I stayed in a 400-square-foot studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. The rent was only $800 a month, which left more money for savings. My neighbors were mostly college students, and the building had paper-thin walls, but I kept my eye on the prize. My car was a 2012 Honda Civic with 160,000 miles on it. The air conditioning had been broken for 2 years, and the passenger side window wouldn't roll down, but it got me to work reliably. My coworkers would sometimes joke about my vintage car, but I knew that every month I wasn't making a car payment was another $400 toward my house fund. Shopping became a strategic mission. I discovered every thrift store within a 20-mile radius of my apartment. My wardrobe consisted entirely of secondhand scrubs for work and carefully selected pieces from consignment shops for everything else. I became an expert at finding designer clothes with the tags still on them for 10% of their original price. Grocery shopping meant clipping coupons, buying generic brands, and eating a lot of pasta and canned soup. The social sacrifices were the hardest part. I missed my college roommate's wedding because I couldn't afford the bridesmaid dress and the trip to Denver. I declined countless birthday parties, baby showers, and girls' trips. My friends started calling me less frequently, and I understood why. When someone consistently can't participate in normal social activities, relationships naturally drift apart. But the most challenging aspect was dealing with my family's constant requests for money. My parents, Harold and Agnes, had developed a pattern over the years of asking for small loans that never seemed to get repaid. $20 here, $50 there, sometimes $100 for an emergency car repair or medical bill. I had learned to set boundaries, but it wasn't easy. 2 years into my savings journey, I made a decision that would later prove to be both smart and catastrophic. I opened a separate savings account at a different bank, one that my parents didn't know about. I kept my regular checking account at the local credit union, where my family had banked for years, but my serious savings went into the new account. This way, when my parents asked about my finances, I could honestly say that my checking account balance was low without revealing the growing nest egg. By year 4, I had developed an almost obsessive relationship with my savings balance. I checked it multiple times a day, watching the numbers climb slowly but steadily. $50,000 felt like a mountain I'd climbed. $60,000 felt like I was finally in striking distance of my goal. When I hit $70,000 last spring, I allowed myself one small celebration: a single glass of wine at home while I looked at real estate listings online. The neighborhood I had chosen was a quiet area about 15 minutes from the hospital. Tree-lined streets, modest but well-maintained houses, good schools for the family I hoped to have someday. I had driven through it so many times that I knew which houses had the best gardens, which ones had recently sold, and which ones might come on the market soon. I had even spoken to a real estate agent and gotten pre-qualified for a mortgage. Last month, when my balance finally hit $80,012, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years. Pure, overwhelming joy. I had done it. I had proven that discipline and sacrifice could create opportunities. I was ready to start looking at houses, seriously ready to move from dreaming to doing. The timing felt perfect for sharing this news with my family at Thanksgiving. I imagined my parents' proud faces when I told them about my accomplishment. I pictured my brother Jerry's surprise and respect. I even thought about how this might inspire other family members to pursue their own financial goals. I was so naive about what was actually waiting for me. The drive to my parents' house should have been filled with excitement, but something felt different the moment I pulled into their driveway. The house looked different. Better. The front door had been painted a rich navy blue, and there were new shutters on all the windows. The landscaping looked professionally done with expensive-looking shrubs and a new stone pathway leading to the front door. I had visited just 2 months ago for my mother's birthday, and none of these improvements had been there. My parents had always been frugal people, the type who would patch a roof leak with duct tape rather than call a professional. Seeing these obvious signs of significant spending made me curious, but I assumed they had saved up for some home improvements. Walking through the front door, my confusion deepened. The living room had been completely transformed. Gone was the worn beige carpet that had been there for at least 15 years, replaced by beautiful hardwood floors. The old sectional sofa had been replaced with a matching set of furniture in rich burgundy leather. Even the coffee table and end tables were new, made of what looked like solid wood, rather than the particle board furniture I remembered. My mother Agnes greeted me with an unusually enthusiastic hug. She seemed almost giddy, her eyes bright with excitement. "Linda, sweetheart, welcome home. Come see what we've done with the place." Her energy felt different, more animated than I had seen her in years. Usually, my mother was reserved, even pessimistic, but today she was practically bouncing on her feet. My father Harold was in the kitchen, and I could hear him whistling. My father never whistled. He was a quiet man who expressed satisfaction through nods and grunts, not cheerful melodies. When I walked into the kitchen, I stopped in my tracks. The entire space had been renovated. Granite countertops had replaced the old laminate. The cabinets had been refaced with a rich cherry wood finish. All the appliances were new and stainless steel, including a massive refrigerator that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. "Dad, this is incredible," I said, running my hand along the smooth granite surface. "When did you do all this?" He beamed with pride, puffing out his chest like a peacock. "We finished up last month. Got a good deal on everything because we paid cash. No financing charges, no interest payments. Sometimes it pays to be smart with money." The comment struck me as odd. My parents had never been the type to have large amounts of cash sitting around. My father had worked as a mechanic for 30 years before retiring, and my mother had been a part-time secretary. They lived comfortably but modestly on Social Security and my father's small pension. This level of renovation would have cost at least $40,000 or $50,000. Maybe more. My brother Jerry arrived with his wife Marlene just as I was processing the kitchen transformation. Jerry looked uncomfortable the moment he walked in, avoiding eye contact and heading straight for the refrigerator to grab a beer. This was unusual behavior for my normally outgoing brother. We had always been close, and he typically greeted me with a big hug and jokes about my work schedule. Marlene seemed nervous too, fidgeting with her purse and checking her phone repeatedly. When I complimented the renovations, she gave me a tight smile and mumbled something about how nice it must be to afford such things. Her tone carried an edge that I couldn't quite interpret. Dinner conversation felt surreal. My parents kept making vague references to new opportunities and smart investments. My mother mentioned how nice it was to finally be able to afford the finer things in life. My father talked about the importance of family helping family and how what belongs to one of us belongs to all of us. These philosophical statements were completely out of character for both of them. As we ate, I noticed more changes throughout the house. New curtains hung in the dining room made of expensive-looking fabric. The old carpet in the hallway had been replaced with the same hardwood floors as the living room. Even the light fixtures had been upgraded to something that looked like it came from a high-end home improvement store. "So how did you save up for all this?" I asked during dessert, trying to keep my tone casual. "You guys must have been putting money away for years." My parents exchanged a look that lasted just a moment too long. My mother's smile faltered slightly before she recovered. "Oh, you know how it is, honey. When you really want something, you find a way to make it happen. Sometimes opportunities present themselves when you least expect them." My father nodded sagely. "That's right. Sometimes the money you need is closer than you think. Family takes care of family, and everything works out the way it's supposed to." These cryptic responses made my stomach start to churn. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. The timeline was what bothered me most. 2 months ago, none of these renovations had been started. High-quality work like this would take weeks to complete, which meant they had begun the project shortly after my last visit. The timing felt too coincidental. Jerry cleared his throat and excused himself to use the bathroom. Marlene followed him, claiming she needed to check on something in the car. Their hasty exit left me alone with my parents, who continued to beam with satisfaction while discussing their various improvements. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I needed to check my bank account. Not because I suspected anything specific, but because something about this entire situation felt off, and I wanted the reassurance of seeing my carefully accumulated savings sitting safely in my account. I excused myself to use the restroom, but instead of heading upstairs, I ducked into my parents' small home office and pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling as I opened my banking app. The Wi-Fi in my parents' house was slow, and the app seemed to take forever to load. Those few seconds felt like hours as I waited for my account information to appear on the screen. I was expecting to see my familiar balance of $80,012 ready to screenshot it and maybe even show my family the fruits of my 5 years of sacrifice. The numbers that appeared on my screen made no sense at first. I stared at them, blinking hard, convinced that there had been some kind of technical error. The balance showed $247.83. That was impossible. I had checked this account just 3 days ago before leaving for work, and everything had been normal. I immediately clicked on the transaction history, my heart now pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What I saw there made my legs give out, and I had to sit down on my father's desk chair to keep from falling. Over the past 3 months, there had been systematic withdrawals from my account. Large amounts ranging from $3,000 to $8,000 at a time. Every single withdrawal had been authorized using my mother's name as a joint account holder. The realization hit me like a physical blow. When I had opened this savings account 4 years ago, I had added my mother as an emergency contact and joint account holder. I was 28 at the time, and it had seemed like a reasonable safety measure. If something happened to me, she would be able to access the account to handle my affairs. I had completely forgotten about this arrangement because it had never been an issue before. I scrolled through the transaction details with growing horror. The dates and amounts corresponded perfectly with what I was seeing in my parents' house. A payment to Wilson's Home Improvement for kitchen cabinets. Multiple transactions at Home Depot and Lowe's. A large payment to Granite Solutions. Another payment to Metropolitan Appliance Center. Even a payment to something called Elite Flooring Services. My mother had been systematically draining my savings account to pay for their home renovations. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, premeditated theft that had been going on for 3 months. while I was working double shifts and eating ramen noodles to save money. My mother was spending my money on granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The betrayal felt like being stabbed in the chest. This wasn't just about money, although losing $80,000 was devastating enough. This was about trust, about the fundamental relationship between a parent and child. I had trusted my mother with access to my account because I never imagined she would betray that trust. The thought that she had been planning this while I shared my excitement about buying a house made me physically sick. I tried to call the bank's customer service line, but it was after business hours on Thanksgiving Day. The automated system offered to connect me to fraud prevention services, but those offices were closed too. I was trapped in this house with the people who had stolen my entire future, and there was no immediate way to get help. I sat in that office chair for several minutes trying to process what had happened. 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of saying no to everything I wanted, 5 years of living like a monk so I could build a better future, and it was all gone. My parents had taken it, spent it on their own comfort, and had been celebrating their good fortune all evening. The cruelest part was realizing how naive I had been. While I was upstairs checking my account, they were downstairs laughing and enjoying their Thanksgiving dinner, probably congratulating themselves on their clever scheme. They had stolen my money and then invited me over to see how they had spent it. The audacity was breathtaking. I forced myself to take screenshots of everything. The account balance, the transaction history, the dates and amounts of each withdrawal. If I was going to confront them, I needed evidence. I also needed to document this for the police report I was already planning to file. This wasn't just a family disagreement about money. This was theft, plain and simple, and I was going to treat it as such. Walking back to the dining room felt like walking to my own execution. My family was still sitting around the table, my parents glowing with satisfaction, while Jerry and Marlene picked at their dessert in uncomfortable silence. They all looked up when I entered, and I could see in my mother's eyes that she knew exactly what I had discovered. There was no surprise on her face, no confusion about why I looked devastated. Just a slight tightening around her eyes that told me she had been waiting for this moment. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "All of us. Right now." The words came out of my mouth like broken glass. "Where is my money?" I held up my phone showing the screenshot of my account balance. $80,000 was in this account 3 days ago. Now there's $247. I want to know where it went. My mother didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin with an expression I had never seen before. It was defiant, almost proud. "We needed it, Linda. We've been living in this outdated house for 30 years, making do with old appliances and worn-out everything. You make good money and you don't have a family to support. We figured you could spare it." The casual way she said, "spare it," made my vision blur with rage. Spare it, Mom? That was my entire life savings. That was 5 years of working overtime, 5 years of living in a studio apartment, 5 years of eating ramen noodles so I could buy a house. You didn't ask me, you just took it. My father joined the defense with an attitude that was equally shocking. "Now, Linda, don't be dramatic. We raised you, we fed you, we put a roof over your head for 18 years. We sacrificed plenty for you when you were growing up. It's not unreasonable to expect some of that investment to pay dividends." "Investment pay dividends," I was shouting now, not caring who heard me. "You stole from me. You went into my private bank account and stole every penny I had saved. That's not an investment, that's theft." Jerry finally spoke up, and what he said made everything even worse. "Linda, I have to tell you something. They asked me for your banking information about 6 months ago. They said they wanted to make a deposit as a surprise gift. I told them I didn't have it and that they should ask you directly. I thought they had dropped the whole thing." This revelation that my brother had known something was being planned even if he hadn't participated felt like another betrayal. "You knew they were planning something with my bank account, and you didn't warn me. I didn't know they were going to take money out, Jerry said defensively. I thought they wanted to put money in. When they stopped asking about it, I figured they had changed their minds. Marlene finally found her voice, and what she said changed everything. Jerry, we have to tell her the rest. Linda, I overheard your parents talking about this at Easter. They were discussing how to access your account and how much they thought they could take without you noticing right away. I thought they were just fantasizing, but apparently they were making actual plans. My mother's mask of righteousness finally slipped, replaced by something ugly and defensive. Oh, so now everyone's going to gang up on us. We're the bad guys for trying to improve our living situation. Linda, you act like we committed some terrible crime, but all we did was borrow some money from our own daughter. Borrowed, I screamed. When were you planning to pay it back? When were you planning to tell me you had borrowed it? This morning you were bragging about paying cash for everything, about how smart you were with money. You were spending my money and congratulating yourselves for being financially savvy. My father's response was the moment I realized I was dealing with people I didn't recognize. You know what your problem is, Linda. You think you're better than us. You think because you went to nursing school and make decent money that you're somehow superior to the people who raised you. Well, let me tell you something, Missy. Everything you are, you owe to us. We created you, we shaped you, and we deserve to benefit from our investment. The word investment again. They literally saw me as a business venture that owed them returns. I can't believe what I'm hearing. You're not even sorry. You're sitting here justifying stealing my entire life savings like it was your right to take it. My mother leaned forward with a coldness I had never seen from her before. Right. You want to talk about rights? We have the right to expect gratitude from our children. We have the right to expect that our sacrifices will be acknowledged. You make $70,000 a year, Linda. You'll save the money again. It's not like we left you with nothing. $70,000 before taxes, I shot back. And it took me 5 years to save $80,000. 5 years of no social life, no vacations, no nice clothes, no decent apartment. 5 years of sacrifice that you just erased in 3 months so you could have granite countertops. Jerry tried to mediate, but his words only made things worse. Look, maybe we can work something out. Maybe Mom and Dad can pay you back over time, set up some kind of payment plan. My mother laughed, actually laughed at this suggestion. Pay her back. With what money? We're retired, Jerry. We live on Social Security and your father's pension. We don't have extra money lying around to pay back loans. Then you shouldn't have spent money you didn't have, I said, my voice now deadly calm. You shouldn't have stolen money that wasn't yours to spend. My father stood up from the table, his face red with anger. That's enough. You're being disrespectful and ungrateful. We're your parents, and you will not speak to us like this in our house. If you can't show us the respect we deserve, then maybe you should leave. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. After stealing everything I had worked for, they were now threatening to cut me off from the family if I didn't accept their theft gracefully. It was emotional blackmail on top of financial theft, and it clarified everything I needed to know about these people. Something fundamental shifted inside me in that moment. The devastated, betrayed daughter was replaced by someone I had never been before, a woman who refused to be victimized. I looked at my father standing there red-faced and threatening, and I felt a clarity I had never experienced in my life. You're absolutely right, Dad. I should leave. But not because I'm being disrespectful. I should leave because I'm done being stolen from, manipulated, and emotionally blackmailed by people who are supposed to love me. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. My mother asked what I was doing, and I looked her straight in the eye as I answered, I'm calling the police. The change in the room was immediate. My father sat back down hard. My mother's face went white. Jerry started to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. The phone was ringing, and when the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly and calmly. I need to report a theft. My mother used her access to my bank account to steal $80,000 over the past 3 months. I have all the documentation, and I'm currently at the scene where the stolen money was spent. My parents looked like they had been slapped. My mother started to say something about how I couldn't involve the police in a family matter, but I wasn't listening to her anymore. I gave the dispatcher my parents' address and my contact information, and they told me an officer would be there within an hour. While we waited, I made my second call. My childhood friend Sarah was now a lawyer specializing in family law, and even though it was Thanksgiving, she answered her phone. I explained the situation quickly, and she immediately started giving me advice about documenting everything and not signing any agreements or accepting any promises from my parents. "Linda," she said, "I need you to understand that this is serious criminal activity. Joint account holder or not, using someone else's money without their knowledge or consent for personal benefit is theft. Don't let them convince you this is a civil family matter. Press charges." My third call was to the bank's fraud prevention hotline. Even though it was a holiday, they had emergency services available. I reported the unauthorized use of my account and started the process of filing a formal complaint. They told me that having someone as a joint account holder didn't give them unlimited rights to drain the account, especially without notifying the primary account holder. Throughout these phone calls, my family sat in stunned silence. I think they had expected me to cry, to beg, to eventually accept their explanations and move on. They had not expected me to immediately start treating this as the crime it was. Jerry finally found his voice. "Linda, I know you're upset, but involving the police seems extreme. This is family. Can't we work this out ourselves?" I looked at my brother, this man I had looked up to my entire life, and realized he was more concerned about family appearances than about the fact that our parents had committed a felony. "Jerry, they stole $80,000 from me. If a stranger had done this, you would absolutely expect me to call the police. The fact that they're our parents doesn't make theft legal." Marlene surprised everyone by speaking up in my defense. "She's right, Jerry. What they did was wrong, and they're not even sorry about it. They're acting like Linda owes them this money." My mother tried one last manipulation tactic, the one she had used on me since childhood. She started crying real tears, talking about how I was destroying the family over money. "Linda, sweetheart, I never meant to hurt you. We just needed help, and we knew you loved us enough to want to help if we asked." "But you didn't ask," I said, unmoved by her tears. "You took. And if you knew I would want to help, why didn't you ask instead of stealing?" My father answered that question in a way that revealed everything. "Because we knew you would say no. You've always been tight with money, always putting your own goals ahead of family needs. We knew you would find some excuse not to help us." There it was. They knew I would say no to giving them $80,000 for home improvements, so they took it anyway. They knew I was saving for a house, they knew how hard I had worked for that money, and they decided their wants were more important than my dreams. The police officer arrived exactly 1 hour after my call. Officer Rodriguez was professional and thorough, taking detailed statements from everyone present. He looked at my bank records, photographed the renovations that had been paid for with my stolen money, and listened to my parents' various justifications with an increasingly skeptical expression. When my father tried to explain that it was family money and that I was being vindictive, Officer Rodriguez interrupted him. "Sir, regardless of family relationships, using someone else's bank account to make purchases without their knowledge or consent constitutes theft. The dollar amount involved makes this a felony." He arrested my parents that night, right there in their beautiful, newly renovated kitchen paid for with my stolen money. They were handcuffed and read their rights. Jerry was horrified, begging me to drop the charges, but I was done being manipulated. As they were being led out of their house, my mother turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "You'll regret this, Linda. You're destroying your own family over money. Money that we'll never be able to pay back anyway." And that's when I said the words that would define the rest of our relationship. "You're right, Mom. You'll never be able to pay it back. But you're going to try anyway, because this isn't over. Not by a long shot." The weeks that followed were the darkest period of my life, but also the most empowering. The initial aftermath of having my parents arrested was devastating. I had essentially become an orphan by choice, cutting myself off from the people who had raised me because they had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. The first few nights after Thanksgiving, I barely slept. I would lie in my studio apartment staring at the ceiling, alternating between rage and grief. During the day, I functioned at work, but my colleagues noticed that something was wrong. I finally confided in my charge nurse, Janet, who had become something of a mentor to me over the years. Janet listened to my story with increasing amazement, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Linda, I've seen a lot of family dysfunction in my 60 years, but what your parents did goes beyond normal family problems. They didn't just steal your money, they stole your trust in the most basic human relationships. You're going to need professional help to work through this." She was right. I started seeing Dr. Patricia Morgan, a therapist who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. Yes, financial abuse was actually a thing, and what my parents had done to me fit the definition perfectly. Morgan helped me understand that my parents' behavior was part of a pattern of entitlement and manipulation that had probably been present throughout my childhood, but that I had been too close to see clearly. Financial abuse often starts small, she explained during one of our sessions. The small loans that never get repaid, the guilt trips about being selfish with money, the expectation that adult children should prioritize family financial needs over their own goals. Your parents escalated to outright theft, but I suspect the groundwork for this behavior was laid years ago. She was right. Looking back, I could see the pattern. The constant requests for money always framed as emergencies or temporary needs. The guilt trips when I hesitated to lend them money. The way they made me feel selfish for wanting to save for my own future, instead of helping them with their immediate wants. The legal proceedings moved forward steadily. My parents were released on bail, but they had to surrender their passports and agree not to contact me directly. Sarah, my lawyer friend, took my case and filed both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. The criminal charges were for grand theft, since the amount exceeded the felony threshold in our state. The civil lawsuit was for the return of the stolen money plus damages, interest, and legal fees. My parents hired their own lawyer, a public defender, who tried to argue that the joint account arrangement gave my mother legal access to the funds. But the prosecutor and Sarah both demonstrated that joint account access was intended for emergencies and account management, not for unauthorized major purchases. The fact that they had hidden their activities from me and spent the money on luxury home improvements rather than necessities made their case even weaker. The most surprising development came from within my own family. Jerry. After initially defending our parents, started to see the situation more clearly. He came to my apartment about 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, looking haggard and ashamed. "Linda, I owe you an apology," he said. "I've been thinking about what they did, and I keep coming back to one question: would I ever take money from my kids' savings accounts to renovate my house? And the answer is absolutely not. What they did was wrong, and I should have supported you from the beginning." Jerry's change of heart meant everything to me. I had lost my parents, but I still had my brother. More importantly, Jerry offered to testify on my behalf about the conversation he had with our parents about accessing my bank account. His testimony would help establish premeditation, making the charges more serious. Marlene also came forward with text messages she had saved from Easter when she had overheard our parents discussing their plans. She had mentioned it briefly on Thanksgiving, but she actually had documented evidence of their premeditation. The text she sent to Jerry that day said, "Your parents are talking about taking money from Linda's account for house renovations. This seems really wrong to me." But the most unexpected support came from extended family members. My father's sister, Aunt Dorothy, called me about a month after the arrest. She wanted me to know that our parents had done something similar to her 15 years earlier, but on a smaller scale. They had borrowed $5,000 for what they claimed was a medical emergency, then never repaid it and acted offended when she asked about it. "I should have warned you," Aunt Dorothy said, "but I thought it was an isolated incident, and I didn't want to cause family drama. Now I realize they've been doing this for years, just getting bolder each time." Other family members started reaching out with similar stories. Cousin Robert had lent them money for car repairs that turned out to be vacation spending. Uncle Frank had co-signed a credit card that they had maxed out and defaulted on. There was a pattern of financial manipulation going back decades, and I had been their biggest score. Meanwhile, my parents were discovering the consequences of their actions. They had spent money they didn't have on home improvements, assuming I would either never notice or would eventually forgive them. Now they were facing felony charges, civil liability, and the very real possibility of having to sell their newly renovated house to pay restitution. Their lawyer approached Sarah about a plea deal. My parents would plead guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for paying full restitution plus interest and damages. The total amount would be around $95,000, which was more than the house was worth after the renovations. I had a choice to make. I could accept the plea deal, which would guarantee I got my money back, but would result in lighter criminal penalties for my parents. Or I could push for the full felony charges, which might result in jail time for them, but no guarantee of financial recovery. Dr. Morgan helped me think through this decision. "What do you need to feel like justice has been served?" she asked. "Is it important to you that they face serious legal consequences, or is recovering your money the priority?" I realized that what I needed most was acknowledgement. Not just legal acknowledgement, but personal acknowledgement from my parents, that what they had done was wrong. The plea deal included a requirement for them to write formal apology letters and to attend financial counseling, which appealed to me more than the possibility of sending them to jail. We accepted the plea deal, but with one additional condition: that I insisted on my parents would have no contact with me until they had paid the restitution in full and completed their counseling requirements. This wasn't about punishment, it was about protecting myself from further manipulation while they dealt with the consequences of their choices. 1 year later, my life looked completely different, and I had learned lessons I never expected to need. The legal proceedings had concluded with my parents pleading guilty to financial fraud and agreeing to pay $95,000 in restitution, interest, and damages. They had been forced to take out a second mortgage on their house to make the payments, which meant they would be paying for their crime for the next 15 years. The money was returned to my account in stages as required by the court order. Each payment felt like a small victory, not because I was vindictive, but because it represented the legal system working as it should. By the time I received the final payment, my savings account was actually larger than it had been before the theft, thanks to the interest and damages that had been awarded. But the most important changes in my life weren't financial. Dr. Morgan had helped me understand that what my parents had done was just the most extreme example of a lifetime of boundary violations and emotional manipulation. I had grown up in a family where my needs and goals were always secondary to my parents' wants, where guilt and obligation were used as weapons, and where saying no to unreasonable requests was treated as betrayal. Learning to set healthy boundaries became my new life skill. I practiced saying no without feeling guilty. I practiced prioritizing my own well-being without being manipulated into believing that was selfish. I learned the difference between family loyalty and family dysfunction, and I chose loyalty to myself and to the people who actually respected my boundaries. The house hunting process became a celebration rather than just a practical necessity. With my savings restored and my credit intact, I was able to find a beautiful 3-bedroom house in the neighborhood I had been dreaming about for years. It had a garden, a fireplace, and a home office where I could manage my finances without fear of someone stealing from me. Jerry and Marlene became my chosen family. Jerry had learned his own lessons about enabling dysfunctional behavior, and he made a commitment to never again stay silent when he saw someone being mistreated. Marlene and I developed a friendship that had never existed before, bonded by shared experience of recognizing manipulation and choosing not to participate in it. My relationship with my job also improved dramatically. Without the constant stress of working extra shifts to rebuild stolen savings, I was able to focus on professional development. I was promoted to charge nurse, which came with both increased responsibility and increased salary. For the first time in my adult life, I could make career decisions based on my interests and goals, rather than just on maximizing income. The most surprising change was in my social life. Without the financial pressure that had kept me isolated for years, I was able to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. I discovered that people were much more understanding about my previous unavailability than I had expected. Several friends told me they had wondered if something was wrong but hadn't known how to ask. I also started dating for the first time in years. Meeting people who had healthy family relationships was initially shocking to me. I had to learn what normal family dynamics looked like, what appropriate boundaries were, and how people could disagree without manipulation or emotional blackmail. It was like learning a new language. My parents completed their court-ordered financial counseling and anger management classes, and they each wrote the required apology letters. My mother's letter was perfunctory and focused mostly on how the situation had hurt her. My father's letter was more thoughtful and included acknowledgement that he had prioritized his wants over my needs and that he understood why I had pressed charges. I chose not to respond to either letter or to resume contact with them. This wasn't about punishment or holding grudges. It was about protecting the new life I had built and the healthy boundaries I had learned to maintain, Dr. Morgan supported this decision, pointing out that reconciliation requires genuine change from both parties and that I was under no obligation to provide opportunities for people to hurt me again. The extended family members who had reached out with their own stories of financial manipulation became an unexpected support network. We started having regular gatherings that we jokingly called survivors' dinners, where we could talk about family dysfunction without judgment and support each other in maintaining healthy boundaries. About 6 months after buying my house, I decided to use some of my restored savings to take the vacation I had been postponing for 6 years. I spent 2 weeks in Italy staying in beautiful hotels, eating at wonderful restaurants, and buying myself things I wanted without calculating whether I could afford them. It was the first time in my adult life that I had spent money on pure enjoyment without guilt. On that trip, sitting in a cafe in Rome, I wrote in my journal about what I had learned. The most important lesson was that family is not just about blood relationships. Family is about people who love you enough to respect your boundaries, who support your dreams instead of stealing them, and who take responsibility for their own problems instead of expecting you to solve them. I also learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's difficult and painful, is not selfish. It's necessary. Allowing people to mistreat you doesn't help them or you. It just enables destructive behavior and teaches people that you don't value yourself enough to demand respect. The financial lessons were important too. I learned to keep my savings completely separate from family access, no matter how trustworthy people seem. I learned that financial independence is not just about having money, it's about having control over your financial decisions. And I learned that the security of knowing no one can steal your future is worth more than any family relationship that requires you to remain vulnerable to theft. As I write this, I'm sitting in my home office looking out at the garden I planted myself in the house I bought with money I saved through my own hard work. My bank account is healthy. My career is thriving, and I'm surrounded by people who respect me and support my goals. It took one of the worst betrayals of my life to teach me how much better life could be when I refused to accept being mistreated. The most important thing I learned is that real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your dreams, your security, or your self-respect. Real love supports your growth, celebrates your achievements, and respects your boundaries. Anything else isn't love, no matter what people call it or how loudly they claim family loyalty. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who treat your well-being as less important than their wants. Sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you were born into, and sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the door to the best life you never imagined possible. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have pressed charges against your own parents? Or would you have tried to work things out within the family? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself from financial abuse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthy boundaries. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about financial abuse and the importance of protecting their savings, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on respect, trust, and genuine love. Don't let anyone convince you that family loyalty requires you to accept being mistreated. Your dreams and your future are worth protecting, even when protection means making difficult choices about the people in your life.